Okay, very
Sounds good,
good.
right? Yeah.
Okay, and we have a quorum, so I'm calling the meeting to order, and thank you all. Um, all right, so first thing is welcome to all participants. Welcome. And as I mentioned earlier, Jen is going to be a little late tonight. She's traveling from New York. Um, and Paul Weller said he'd be here, so I'm sure he's coming. Um, and we have first just a review of where we are in the process. And we are almost done. We're in the home stretch now on the second main big thing, which is to get the election rules and procedures in order and submit them to the council before the December council meeting, which is December 14th. So it's coming up. And I have a report from Michael about Eclectic. He called Eclectic. He's back from vacation this week, and he called Electech, and they said that they'll get a bid to him for this year's election work within 2 weeks, and that they also, John, you'll be pleased because you're the one who asked for this. They also might be interested in bidding on the RFP for the voter roll verification project.
Oh,
That's nice news. Now, they may or may not. I mean, they didn't give him a firm commitment that they would, but they said that that is something that they sometimes do and would be interested in bidding on for us. So, yay, team.
yeah, great.
Okay. Um, the next thing is to approve the minutes from the committee meeting on November 13th. And John, again, thanks to you for getting those organized. We have a quorum here, so we can go ahead and vote. Are there any changes in the minutes? Any additions or revisions? Nomi?
Nope.
John? Nope.
I
No, not
accept
me.
the, go ahead.
Katie?
I move to approve.
John, you want a second?
Yeah, I second it.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved unanimously, 3-0. We really can't set the schedule for the next two meetings until we have the rest of our team here. So let's hold off on that. And the next item we have is to review the election comments in the 2023 Village Survey. And Katie, thank you for sending those along. Nomi, John, did you have a chance to look at those? And
Yeah, I looked at them. There was some, I don't know. I really don't have a firm feeling about the validity of this survey. Okay, seriously. I mean, I think it was haphazardly done. That's my point. Okay, but here again, that's me or my thoughts. I mean, it could have been improved upon, I believe, in terms of what we were asking the residents to look at or think about, whatever. Anyway, go ahead. Naomi, you had a question. I know that.
No, I didn't actually. Nothing jumped at me. Um, I don't think anybody's feeling that there are barriers there. I don't think there are any revealing issues that have to do with what we need to do next. I didn't see a whole lot of findings there.
Yeah, I agree. There was a couple of comments about, yes, keep the mail vote elections, which of course do have a much higher participation rate and are better in terms of accessibility and civil rights and all that. A couple of people who said they want to go back to in-person voting. I think they probably have no clue how much logistical work that in-person voting does. And of course,
Right.
having a 3-hour window for voting in person is an enormous amount of work for very little payoff if you want to look at in terms of an efficiency analysis. We get much better turnout with a mail vote, and it's better for young families. It's better for people with disabilities, et cetera, in terms of.
And there were comments appreciating the mail voting.
I saw there were
Yeah.
a couple of those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there were. Yeah.
And Nomi, you and I are the two people on this committee who actually did run in-person voting back in the day. And by my estimate, it was at least 70%, 75% more work than doing it by mail, maybe 90% more work. In terms of the staff time, it was an enormous burden on the staff to do all those.
Well, the other thing was the timing, I mean, we didn't get done until late in the evening and people had been there, to cast their vote in the early evening and there was not much we can do to help them celebrate. So it was hard to manage really.
Yeah.
And I in general, I think mail-in voting really increases accessibility.
Yeah, that's true in the research nationwide. that mail-in voting, you know, is just so much more
Right.
in terms
Yeah.
of civil rights and accessibility and
Yeah.
all those issues.
And of course, we offer the other option is come
Well,
in,
that's right.
you know, one evening and come and drop off your, you know, in the mailbox. That's fine.
Yep, and we have that secure mailbox, and we have a procedure in the regs that says how it's supervised. You know, it's a whole lot more efficient and also I think more secure in terms of, you know, one of our duties is ballot security.
Mhm.
And having the contractor mail the ballots to the voters is much more secure than having loose ballots floating around the village.
Right. And
And
by the way, we're not over COVID yet.
this is true. This is true. And that RSV, that respiratory virus that's going
Yeah,
around,
yeah,
apparently it gets really serious for some people. So we need to be
yeah.
very mindful of not
Right.
endangering public health here. Any other comments on the survey results? Okay, well, Katie, again, thank you for sending them. It was helpful.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, it's just like for whatever it's worth, you know, the results. I always find the comments are the meat and potatoes. So
Yeah, I
um,
like reading the comments. I think
it-
people tell you things that they wouldn't say normally otherwise.
yes, yeah, there's something to be said with the anonymous component. And actually, Arthur is the one that extracted everything, and then I just extracted the election committee section for it. And I think the total survey overall, I think Arthur said there was about Michael said there were 800 comments. So
That's
Yeah,
great.
that, let me say, there are 800 comments overall.
yeah,
But John, when you said you didn't think that some of the questions were well worded or something, so my favorite answers or responses were that we ought to be doing more about the helicopter noise.
Um,
Where did that
I
come
won't
from?
disagree with that.
John, I don't know.
You
I
know,
hope
seriously, you had 800 comments
Yes, yeah.
and you just
I-
picked out the ones that were most
Well,
pertinent
we
to,
picked out the ones that were the comments to the election questions.
yeah. Overall, for the whole survey, there were 800 comments, but I just provided that portion for that just had to do with the election committee. But Arthur's the one that went through all of them, took them from a Excel sheet and put them in a Word document. So it's a very good read.
Well, thank you both very much. It sounds like it was a lot of work, and I know people appreciate it. And we sure do. Okay, the next item under the 7:55 sort of housekeeping section of our agenda is to discuss the distribution of the committee's RFP, which the council, thank you both, approved on November 16th. And Katie, the things you said at that council meeting were really lovely. And I know everybody on the committee appreciated your support very much. And Arthur, you as well. I mean, it was really lovely to see you, you know, support what we're trying to do here, because we are trying to do this, you know, really well and certainly to the best of our ability. And anyway, so thank you for the public support there. Distribution. Michael has sent the RFP out to a number of his contacts, because, you know, he's got that master's degree in public management. And so he sent it out to a number of people that he knew from, you know, his graduate work. And I am a Common Cause election observer. So I sent it to Joanne Antoine, who's the director of Common Cause for the state of Maryland. And of course, she coordinates election observers statewide. And she was very excited to know that we were actually doing this to clean up our voter roll, and thought it was a good model for other towns, including much larger ones, which of course also have much larger problems with their voting rolls. And anyway, she thought it was a great idea. She said to say hi to everybody in Martin's Additions who cares about elections, which is us. And anyway, so it's getting distributed there. Michael did mention that the Maryland Municipal League, which normally has sort of a job and RFP site, their site is down. Katie and Arthur, did you know about that?
No, but they've
Oh,
had
no,
some problems in the past with it. Yeah. So
Because
the
that was one
site.
of the obvious places to post it.
Yeah.
And Arthur, had you heard any more about what's going to happen there?
No, that's first I've heard it.
Yeah. You know, and that's too bad, because that's a really, you know, appropriate source for an RFP for a small town doing election verification. So, you know, that option was not available, but I think you were looking at other possibilities. And the fact that Electech, you know, may actually bid on it, I mean, that's great news. Let's see what they say. Because they have the level of expertise that really is nice. Anything else on the distribution of the RFP? Okay. I don't know, Katie and Arthur, if there's someplace else you can think to send it, by all means, please do. You know, Michael said we should get it out as widely as we can to see what kind of response we get.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Look into that, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the residents' comments, questions, and suggestions. And we don't have our residents here, although I hope some will come by. So we're going to go to the action items. And as I said, we're almost done with this project in terms of getting the document put together and consolidated. Instead of 5 different documents from last year, it's now organized and in a fairly logical, coherent structure.
Took a lot of work. Thank you, Marty.
Well, you all, every
No,
single-
no, you did the lines.
I just put the pieces together.
portion.
You guys, updated the pieces and really looked at them carefully. And this is a team project all the way. But it was actually kind of fun to put it together. I won't say it wasn't a lot of work. It was, but you all did such a good job on the various
Yeah.
sections that
It
it
hangs,
really,
it hangs very well.
yeah, we now have got numbered. We've got 15 sections in it, all labeled and numbered, well organized. So the next thing would be to go through the draft of the consolidated document. But before we do that, I think we ought to go to Ron's comments and just walk through them systematically. Okay. And John, can I ask you to do a favor? Would you call Paul Weller and see if he's having trouble getting online or something?
Yeah.
Thank you. Because he should probably be here for this discussion. So my thought was to just take Ron's comments, and I've got a copy here of the draft voter roll verification procedure, which is the first piece he talks about, and then the draft ordinance or policy, whatever you want to call it, which is the second piece. So let's start with the voter roll verification. I was really pleased that he only had 2 comments on that, and both of them are helpful. A lot of what he says here is helpful. The first one, we're talking about how we verify the current residency to resolve discrepancy. He suggests that we add, by applying the steps below. That's easy to do. So I'm just going to check that off. And if you agree to do it, everybody agree?
I agree.
Okay. That's sort of administrative. It's easy to do that.
Yeah.
The second point he makes under voter roll verification. In the first one, he talks about directory information. And just to clarify for the record, we don't compare the voter roll to the directory. The directory is a smaller list of names than the voter roll is. We compare the county voter roll and the state voter roll and the VMA voter to it's called the VMA office list of residents, just to use our terminology correctly, which is different than the directory.
Hey, Paul, John.
So anyway, just a clarification there. On number 2, we certainly can add a line that says that the committee, in terms of all the different processes it can use to check the voter, can consider sending an annual mailing to each voter by first-class mail. And that is, in fact, what the county does. I had a long talk with the county board of elections director about how they do that. And, certainly I have no objection to putting that in here. It's an option,
I'll
future
mention it
committees
off
might
the
do, or we might even do.
All right, cool.
The
Thanks.
thing is, what I hear from the
Okay,
county is that it doesn't work very well because the response rate is so low. These days, apparently, people are not in the habit of actually giving return mail to the post office anymore. They just throw it out. So if you're tossing out mail that came to, suppose you're Mr. and Mrs. Jones and your former house owner was Mr. and Mrs. Smith, well, the Joneses just throw out mail addressed to the Smiths. They don't forward it to the post office. And the county is just in terrible straits because people are not returning that mail. And if the county board of elections gets a piece of mail that says from the post office no longer at this address, then they use that as documentation to take somebody off the county voter roll. But they're not getting the mail back because people aren't responding. John, go ahead.
Yeah, I just talked to Paul. He said he's having trouble getting on, and he sent a message to Arthur. Maybe he can.
No,
said he
okay,
can't get
here he
in.
is. He's on now.
He's on now.
Oh, he's on
Hey.
now. Okay, cool. All right.
Hey,
Thank you.
Paul, welcome. Thank you, Arthur. Paul, unmute yourself. You're just in time.
Had nothing to do with it.
Too modest,
Paul figured
Arthur.
it out. He figured it out for himself.
Well, hi, Paul. Welcome. We were just starting to go through Ron's comments. And
Okay.
so you're right in time for the meat and potatoes here. We also skipped one thing on the housekeeping part, which is setting our next 2 meetings. So now that we have you here, I wanted to check with all of you in terms of that item, that housekeeping item, before we go back to Ron's list. I'm thinking that we know we've got our meeting on December 6th. That's our next one, kind of our wrap up before we go to the council with our document. My question is, do you think we need to have a meeting after the council meeting? Council meeting's on the 14th, which is a Thursday. And, I'm free the 15th, but I wanted to check with you guys. Maybe that following Monday night, which would be December,
19th,
yeah,
I mean,
18th,
18th.
18th.
18th,
Yeah.
yeah,
Can you guys do 7:45 on the 18th, just in case we need some follow-up?
that works for me, 18th.
Yeah, it works for me.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, 7:45 on the 18th. Let me write that down.
Okay,
All right. And the other piece that you missed, Paul, is that Michael had talked to Electech, and Electech is going to get us their estimated bid for the election work this year, but they also might be interested in putting in a separate second bid on the RFP, which was really nice news. Now, they didn't promise they'd do that, but they were
Oh.
at least interested, so they might, and that'd be great. So,
very good.
okay, that was sort of the main thing. And we also approved the minutes. Okay, so that was unanimous. So don't need to vote. Okay, going back to Ron's notes here. All right, he gave us 2 notes on the voter roll verification, both of which are doable. We were just talking about number 2, which is sending an annual mailing to each voter, which is perfectly doable. Problem is that from the county experience with it is people don't return their mail, if it's misaddressed. So that doesn't work very well, and it may not be a efficient use of funds and time, because the staff would have to help arrange to get that mailing out. And so I don't know, but I'm perfectly happy if you all agree to put it on the list of options for procedures that, future committees can use to verify a voter roll. It's a legitimate technique. Do you all want to go ahead and do that? Is that a yes on that one?
That's a yes for me. I move for that.
Okay, second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Okay,
Aye. Okay, that's a yes. Okay, going down to the ordinance. And Ron is good. He puts one of the key questions right up front, whether we need an ordinance or whether we should just have a rules and procedures policy. And this is really up to the council, as Ron says. If you want to have a stable election in the future, it probably makes sense to do an ordinance, because that is harder to change. You have to have a public hearing and all of that. With an ordinance, it's a more
We need stability and
that's
that's
the thing.
ordinance, yeah.
So an ordinance does give you more stability. It's harder to change it. Problem with a resolution, which is what we lived with in the past, is that it can be changed every year. And I know, boy, I don't think any of us ever want to go back and forth like we have the last couple of years. That contention was just so stressful. And, arguing the same things over and over again is really pointless. I mean, why put this community through that? And so, the argument for an ordinance is that it stabilizes the elections better, right?
I actually am ready to vote on that.
Okay. Paul?
There's
John,
no
any
doubt in my
comments?
mind.
I'm not so sure. I mean, I understand the policy versus the ordinances. There's no question about that. Of course, there's flexibility in policy as opposed to the flexibility of the ordinance. Why wasn't the ordinance brought up prior to this year? I mean, or has it been brought up? I don't know. Maybe Arthur knows or Katie knows.
No, the reason, Ron's argument and the reason in the past is that this is.
Can you speak up? I can hardly hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where the microphone is on my computer, but I'll.
We
speak
can
up.
hear you now, so stay where you
Okay.
are. You got it.
Okay. The reason is that this is a procedural document with a lot of detail. And if you change any detail in that, it would require going back and reopening the whole ordinance process. That can take 2 months.
Mhm.
It has to be changed, it has to be proposed, it has to have a hearing period. If the dates don't coincide well with council meetings, it can extend to 3 months. So making it there's been 2 ways, either a policy or a resolution. We can do it on the spot. And this is Ron's argument that it's mainly a procedural document that can be changed in small ways. And so making it a policy or a resolution makes it a great deal easier. Now, for you, that's the argument against doing it. But I think the argument for the council is going to be keeping it as we've done in the past. I can't speak for my fellow council members, but that's the way the argument has gone in the past.
Mhm. Katie, do you have a thought on that, or do you want to share it or not? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Oh, no, it's okay. I mean, I'm would be supportive of an ordinance. It's just it's a process. It's a protocol. So that's the thing, is that, the whole process is lengthy, but that doesn't mean that I wouldn't be supportive of it or find that it's necessary. I think Ron had pointed that out, that, his opinion is not necessary, but, at this point, I haven't heard back. It was shared with the other council members, and I haven't heard back from anybody yet other than Arthur.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I don't have a gauge yet on what, the others would find, but I'm definitely, interested in visiting the ordinance, but it's a process that would have to start. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's both the strength and the weakness, that it's harder to change it once you put it in an ordinance. That's a
Yeah.
benefit if you want to stabilize things.
Mhm.
Because I think, Arthur, you said that, our point of view is that we want to stabilize things, but, really the council has put in an inordinate amount of time on this election stuff in the last couple of years, and it's your time that's really getting sunk here every time we have to go through the same stuff over and over again. And so, you could think of it as sort of self-preservation for the council to make it an ordinance, because then there would be more of a formal process, and you would not be pressured to change the regs every single year and have big community contention and all that stuff. I mean, who needs that distress, right? It was distressing for everybody.
Right.
And your time is valuable. I mean, you got a lot else to do. And so putting it in an ordinance actually protects the council from my perspective.
I concur in that. I think once we get a format here that we can all abide by, that we should go to an ordinance so that it has it can't be played with each time we get on.
A good way to put it. The other point
Yeah.
I did was follow up on Ron's point about the level of administrative detail. And of course, if
Mhm.
you look at the state law, which of course are ordinances, state statutes, they on elections, it's all detail, it's all administrative detail. So there's nothing inherently wrong about having a law that has a lot of administrative detail in it, or an ordinance here locally. The same is true, I think, of the building code that we have, has a lot of detail in it, administrative detail. I haven't looked at the tree code lately, but I think it does as well. And so, that alone is not a reason not to make it an ordinance, the fact that it includes administrative detail. But I think the point is that we don't want all the mechanics to be changing year to year. We don't want people to, fool around with them. I mean, these are good. The council has basically approved this set of procedures twice now. And we are just consolidating it all in one place to be efficient and, clear about things. And there's a good reason, that it's specific. It has to be, to make sure that we have fair, accurate elections. But it's exactly the same kind of level of administrative detail that the state regs have
Mhm.
and that other regulations in Martin's Additions have. So I don't think that argument from Ron is particularly compelling. You can have a very detailed ordinance, and we do. So
Well,
just
I
a
would
thought.
say, make your argument, vote your vote, and we'll bring it up. We'll discuss it at the meeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Katie? Yes?
No, I mean, no, that you've raised really compelling arguments, and then, hearing from Paul, who's a former council member as well as an esteemed member of the election committee, I think there's a real merit in what you're saying. And while it can be an administrative lengthy process, I feel like, yeah, it has to get a little harder before it gets better in the long run. So, pay for it in time and energy now, but it would pay off in an easier street down the road.
We
that's how I
certainly
see
hope so. We
Yeah.
sure hope so.
That's how I
Okay.
see it. But yeah,
Okay.
like Arthur said, make the argument and yeah. So,
Are we ready to vote? Does anyone want to chime in on more on this? All right, committee members. We
Yep.
need a motion to.
Okay, let's let the rubber hit the road, Marty.
And that means?
That means let's go for it.
Okay, we have a motion to
Yes.
say your motion, John.
Yes, I second the motion. If that's what you said, you're sort of breaking up a little bit to me.
Okay, the motion is
We're
to,
gonna go for procedure.
right, to recommend that the council adopt this not just as a policy resolution, but as an ordinance. Is that the
Right.
motion?
Yeah.
Okay, we have John put it forward. Paul, you want to second it?
I'll second, yes.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
I,
Okay, we have a unanimous vote for ordinance. And again, if the council decides to make it a resolution, that's not as solid going forward. It's not as stable, but it's perfectly workable. It's just not as firm. And we certainly hope that people don't keep trying to rewrite the wheel here, reinvent the wheel. Okay, so ordinance is 4-0. Okay. Let's see. All right, number 2 under ordinance is the same thing. Moving it all would mean that anytime a change has to be made, a new ordinance would, you have to have an ordinance amendment to do that. But again, that's perfectly doable. It just takes 2 months or 3 months instead of doing it like a resolution vote can be pretty much overnight. All right, so going to number 3, certain policy changes. This goes to the sort of the heart of what has been a real source of contention in the last couple of years, which is the independence of the election committee, which is not, of course, entirely independent. It has to comply with these very detailed administrative regulations that the council approves. The council approves the regs and the committee carries them out. But there have been real tensions about having the staff involved in managing the election in 20 and 21, having them decide who gets a vote by putting the staff in charge of the voter roll, which actually under state law is really a no-no. The state law is very clear that whatever agency is managing the election process is responsible for the voter roll, because that's considered a key central part of the election process. Not something that a board of elections can pawn off to somebody else. And of course, Michael and Aaron have way too much work to do to verify a voter roll in any case. But there has been this confusion in the last few years about having the staff involved in the day-to-day election management. And that, of course, got a lot of community concern going, because that is not traditionally what we've done in Martin's Additions. We used to have, for decades, we had this very clear, we call it the election firewall. It was an operational boundary where once the council approved the procedures, the election committee went and did them. And the staff really, other than providing the data, like, the voter roll from last year, didn't get involved in election management at all. I don't know if you remember, Arthur, and Katie, you might remember, back in 2015, there was this big community hubbub because one of the assistants in the village office, who was on the staff of the village, actually handled a live absentee ballot. And that was considered a big, community scandal, because the staff isn't supposed to touch the ballots or have access to the ballots or be involved in any way with the voter process, the election process. And, it was, a pretty hard time for that staff member. They were just trying to be helpful, but they shouldn't have been handling a live ballot. That was how clear that line was. And one of the things I think is really important for us to do at this point to stabilize the process is, in fact, to clarify what the roles are. And that the staff really should be hands-off like they traditionally were. Council should be hands-off. Council members should not be altering election notices or intervening in the election process. And, because there's obviously a conflict of interest there, especially if it's an incumbent candidate council member. So to keep that really clean and clear, I think that part of what we've done in looking through all these documents and consolidating this is to really be systematic and consistent about where the boundaries are, to really reestablish that. And I don't know, I'd like the committee to discuss that. Is that boundary, that firewall, as important as I think it is, or what? What do you guys think? Nomi? Paul?
Well, I'm not sure where you're going in that.
Okay, well, it's about the
I
independence.
think you make it a really clear case that
Okay.
if indeed the staff works for the council, and if their council members, for example, are running again, it creates a conflict of interest
Conflict of
from day
interest.
one.
Yeah.
That's one of many examples of how we need to guard against the staff being involved in the election. So
Paul?
I think we have to make it clear that the election committee is in charge with guardrails The staff is not involved any more than the council would be involved.
Thanks,
I
Naomi.
think in the election process, the thing we have to protect is conflict of interest. And you've got elected members on the council that will have a conflict of interest if they get involved in anything. I think we should have primary authority.
And in fact, we do. I went back and looked at the charter language and quoted it here in my notes. It's quite definitive. The charter says, quote, all elections shall be managed by the election committee, not
Right.
maybe or will be or might be, but shall, which is, compulsory.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in the charter anywhere that says that the staff or council members even can be involved in election management. I mean, the charter is really clear on this. They use the word managed, and we use the word conduct.
I think, Marty, the contention here is the word manage versus conduct. The charter and the code both use the word manage. I think if you change it to manage, that would eliminate some of the issues. But when you say the village manager works for the council, he works for the village of Martin's Additions.
But he
He-
reports to the
he's-
council, Arthur.
He reports to the council, but he is an employee of the village.
Right.
And the manager or whoever the staff is, does work on the election. They help compile the election roll. If the manager or staff did not participate, you would have no election roll.
Well, actually, that's not quite right, Arthur. Let me just sort of clarify that if I can. The election roll from last year was done by the election committee, not by the staff. The staff last year was not responsible for verifying voters. The committee was, and that was proper according to the regs that you approved last year. They did that. So that voter roll is just a government document that the committee produces, but which is on file in the village office. The staff doesn't produce the voter roll.
But
staff
they,
does
they
keep-
use the contact list, they use the informal notes
They-
of who was coming and going, who died and who came
That-
of age and so on.
That is the office resident list is another government document separate from the directory, which the staff is responsible for the office list. We call it the village office list of residents. That's the staff's government data responsibility, but that's not the voter roll. That contributes to the committee's ability to
Contributes,
check
that's
the
right.
voter roll.
So
You see what I'm
I
saying?
think that the argument that the staff cannot is not participatory at all is just wrong. There is participation. There's
They're
participation.
not participating in the management. They're participating in providing the data. They also, of course, post the notices because the committee
Right.
can't post its own notices.
Right,
And they hire the contractors. Those are the three
that's right. Okay.
so staff
So-
support functions that they do. But none of those are decision-making management of the election process. That's just providing data and posting notices and hiring contractors, which is different than management. So I think that it really is a clear line here. And I'm glad we're talking about it because the council, I mean, the charter says very clear, the elections shall be managed by the committee, not by anybody else.
Conduct. I'm
Conducted-
sorry.
So you'd be happy
Now
if
I'm
we just-
using your words.
Right,
You're
right.
right. You're right.
Okay, so you're
Right.
saying that if we took out the word if we use the word manage instead of conduct, that the issue goes away?
I believe so.
Okay, I think they're the same. I think conduct is just.
Well,
a little
but you
more
want to
formal.
be consistent with both of the documents that you're working under.
Okay, so let's have a committee discussion on that. I don't see much difference between conduct and manage, other than, we could say conduct and manage, because conduct says that you're
Just
in charge.
use the language that's there. There's no, as you say, there's no need to change it. So avoid any future problems and just use the operative words.
Okay. I was concerned because Ron's note said that it looked like, maybe the committee was just sort of a middle manager and that the council members could come in on top of manage the election process, or the staff could manage the election process. Whereas the word conduct, I think, makes it clear where the responsibility is, that the committee is responsible for the election process. So I thought conduct was clearer. I don't know, committee members, what do you think? Anyone want to weigh in on that?
I think conduct is a stronger word, and I think that's what we should use.
I would go for conduct myself.
I would as well. Marty,
I think it's clearer. And again, what we're trying to accomplish here is to really end the stress and contention by just being very clear about where these boundaries are. And I think that, we can discuss this with the council when we present the thing, but there is, I think, a reason to use conduct. I think it is clear. I think that you're right. And we now have a 4-0 vote. You want to vote on the word conduct?
Yeah.
All,
I
I
move,
vote for conduct,
Okay.
yes.
I move, Paul seconds, all in favor of using the
Yep.
word conduct?
I,
I conduct, I
Okay.
vote for conduct.
All
Okay.
right, we've got 4-0 on that. Okay. And Arthur, I'm glad you're here while we're talking about this. Anything else on number 3A?
Not for me.
Okay. In terms of Ron's point there about the council having some control and supervision of the process, of course they do. The way that works is that, residents have a right to petition for redress of grievance. If the council does something, if the committee does something the council doesn't like, the residents will tell the council about it. And the council can always ask for accountability from the election committee because we take an oath of office. We're public officials. So there is a mechanism to make sure that the election committee does what it's supposed to do, which is the public accountability mechanism. And since our meetings are all totally open, that mechanism is a pretty good way to ensure accountability. And the council is the ultimate, remedy if a committee is not operating properly. But anyway, just follow up on that. Certification.
One last point of that, I don't want to belabor this.
No,
but
go ahead.
Ron makes this one point that the committee operates under the supervision of the council. So all committees are creatures of the council, and members can be removed and be appointed. So
Yeah, that is true, Arthur, and that is, sort of the essential structure. It's
just keep that.
interesting, though,
I
that
mean,
the charter-
I don't.
Go
As I
ahead.
said, I don't want to belabor it, but just keep that in mind.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting in the charter is the language in there that says that the committee members on the election committee shall serve through the end of that next election cycle. And that's, again, a provision that's in there to prevent council interference or intervention, that the committee members should not be subject to being threatened by the council for, if an incumbent candidate doesn't like something that the committee did, they can't just use that as a reason to remove a committee member. The charter actually provides stronger protections for the election committee to, again, bolster the independence, the responsibility of them to conduct an independent election, a neutral independent election. But yeah, I mean, overall supervision is always there. And that goes with the territory. Public accountability, though, is the main mechanism that we have open meetings and people know what we're doing. Okay, certification of voter roll. This is something that we've been doing for years and years. Gene Sperling and Ted Stoddard and all the Frank Carell taught me how to certify a voter roll back 15 years ago. And Ron says it's not required by the charter. It is, I would argue, required by the nature of the job, which is that we are legally responsible for the accuracy of that voter roll, we the committee. And we have a whole voter roll verification process written that we have to follow, that complies with the state regs and everything else. So yes, you use the county voter roll from the statewide registration. And he says local registration has not historically been needed, but that's actually not quite right, because we've had, in 2021, we had all those inaccurate ballots. There were enough inaccurate ballots that were sent out that could have affected the outcome of the election that year. And of course, last year, we had 747 voters. And we really do need a clean voter roll. I mean, the council has agreed with that. You approved our RFP. So I do think that it has historically been needed that we have certification, because somebody's got to take responsibility for that. And if you have an election that's challenged, a mail vote election especially needs to have accurate voter rolls. If we have an election that's challenged because the voter roll was flawed, I don't want that responsibility landed on the staff for sure. They don't certify the voter roll, because then they'd be tied up in a court case, right? Saying that they didn't do their job thoroughly enough or whatever. It could get really messy and time consuming. So, that's one reason why the historic practice in Martin's Additions has been that the voter roll is the responsibility of the committee, and that the committee certifies it. I can remember sitting in that office, the village office, on election day every year, when the 5 years I was on before, signing on that voter roll. And we physically signed it, in ink. And usually, there was, Matt was there, Matt Trollinger was there, or one of the other committee members was there to witness it, and they sometimes co-signed it. it wasn't a real formal process. Now it is. I mean, one of the nice things that I think we have from the regs in the last couple of years is that there's now a formal, statement that you signed to certify it. It's become more professionalized, which is good. But it is in fact needed, I think. So that voter roll certification protects the staff from getting tangled up in a court case if somebody says we screwed up the voter roll. It's not on the staff. The person who certifies it is the one responsible. Does that make sense to everybody?
Marty, I have a question. From what I'm hearing you saying is that it sounds like once the voter roll was certified by the independent contractor, then we have to certify what they certify. Is this correct?
Let me clarify that. Good question, John. No, we the committee prepare the voter roll and we send it to the contractor. We verify the voters. We send it to the contractor first week of April. That's what our regs say, and that's the timetable that we're sticking to from last year. Then the contractor sends out the ballots, but they don't send out a ballot to anybody that we don't put on that list, right? They cannot send out a ballot. What they do is they keep a record independently as a company, as a contractor for us, of all the ballots they sent out. So we have actually two parallel sets of documents. If you need to audit it later or verify it later, Joe Smith, was added to the voter roll by the committee because he provided the documentation, And then we sent his name to the contractor, and the contractor verifies that it's one of the ballots they sent out was to Joe Smith. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, but in effect, though, don't they certify it though?
No, what they do is they keep a list of who we gave them, right? So they've
Okay,
got
but,
documentation.
Well, then I'm a little perplexed why we're not requiring to, in our solicitation, where we're not requiring them to certify it. I mean, I just a thought that came to my mind. I may be left based on this, but it seems like if we're paying them a lot of money, they should be able to do it accurately and certify it.
They do have the list. They do have the
Sure,
list on
okay.
request. They can provide us with the list. Here's the 747 voters we
Yeah,
told you to send the ballot to. Give us the list of people you sent the ballot to, and it should have the same 47 on it.
Enough said.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
we can certainly verify that they sent out the thing. And in fact, in the regs here, we're required as a committee to verify that they are using the list we gave them, which means that we probably do need to do a check like that down the road. It doesn't spell out the details, but it's an easy cross check. Just call them up and say, send us a list of who you sent the ballots to, and then we do a computer run. It should be the same names. And if anybody's missing, we get on it, right? Because that's our job to manage the process. Does that make sense?
Yep, very good. Thanks, Marty,
Okay.
for clarification.
Okay. So, Ron is correct in talking about this when he talks about that there are two ways that somebody gets on the voter roll in Martin's Additions. One is they can register at the state. If they're on the county voter list which is from the state registration, then they're on our list. But the other way is if they're not on the county list, then they have to give us some documentation. And we need that's called the supplemental list, the people on the county list that we verify, and then the supplemental people who aren't on the county list. And we basically certify the combined list of all the valid voters when we give it to the contractor. And then again, at the end of the process, because people can still add new voters, right up to election day, which is a good thing. It's voter friendly. And so on election day, the committee then votes to certify the final that was used that year. Maybe the 10 new voters got added in the period between April 7th and the final election day. But the official voter roll for the village is the one we certify on the final election day, because that's the updated, most current list. Make sense? So on this one, we just need to vote that we will continue to certify the voter roll, I think, because certainly somebody has to, and it's our job.
It's our job, yeah.
Okay, we have a motion?
I so move that we certify the voter roll.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor, please?
Hi,
Okay, me too. So that's 4 out of 4. Okay, thank you. And there's good reason to do that. Accepting nominations. This is really an interesting one because to my knowledge, in all the years I've been paying attention to elections in Martin's Additions, there's only been one case where an election committee tried to turn down a nominee, and that was you, Katie. And that was awful. I mean, it was terrible. You were with a sick kid in the hospital, as I recall, and you got your paperwork in just before midnight, and then they said that they didn't receive it till after midnight. Am I remembering this right?
It was on the dot, on the dot.
On the dot at midnight. Obviously, any kind of professional management responsibility requires some good judgment.
But I
And
think because it was over email, there was a lag time, and The
So
deadline was midnight, and even my timestamp said midnight
I remember that.
in that neighborhood. But yeah, but it was a split, like we're talking minutes.
Yeah. And what a day for you with a sick kid in the hospital, for Pete's sake. Anyway, I do think that the decision was right. The council, when you raised it at the council meeting, the council said, hey, accept her paperwork, which was, of course, the right call. I think we benefit as a village from having more candidates, not fewer. And anything that's arbitrary that would prevent somebody from running is not okay. So I'm very glad you got to run, and congratulations on winning. But I think that we have got that 30-minute grace period that you asked for earlier. Remember that from 2022? That's
Right,
in this year's
something.
regs. That's in here
Mhm.
to prevent that
Mhm.
kind of like, close call stuff. And Ron is asking if we need to put something in here about how the committee would refuse a nomination or refuse to accept candidate paperwork. And I don't think that we ever would. If it meets the legal qualifications, it comes in on time with that 30-minute grace period, and the candidate has 24 hours. If they screw up their conflict of interest form, they can fix that in 24 hours. That's in the regs. So I can't imagine any basis on which we would actually ever refuse a candidate. I mean, can you guys think of anything? I can't picture it.
Can we follow state law on that? Is there some way that we
We
could?
are. Yeah, state law has a firm filing deadline for candidates. And if you miss it, you can run as a, write-in, but if you miss it, you miss it. And we certainly have a responsibility as a committee to publicize that date way in advance and multiple times. So everybody knows, we'll be putting out a lot of public information, encouraging people to run and all that stuff. But I think that the regs are so clear that you either, and they got that 30-minute window, so you either make the deadline or you don't make the deadline. And
Marty, I have one possibility of something arises, and it also comes about who is a
Okay.
qualified resident, who is a qualified voter. And
Uh-huh.
it's a person says they want to run, and the question is, are you a resident? And so then the question comes up about how do you determine whether somebody's a resident or not?
Yeah, that's where we
How
have,
that links back
it
to
does.
the other issue.
It does. This is all connected, which is why it's important to get it right, because it's all a big mosaic that fits together.
Mm.
Yeah, the definition of resident is interesting,
Mm.
because that's a new definition that Arthur, you spearheaded to get and it's the right definition. And we have this whole series of things that we check to make sure somebody's actually a resident, because we can't give them a ballot if they're not a resident. And so, yeah, I think that that's part of what goes on. Now, by the time somebody puts in their paperwork for a candidate, that's like end of March. The period for nomination starts in late February, and then they have 30 days later, they have to put in their paperwork for a candidate filing. And by the end of March, we're pretty close to that April 7th deadline, which is when we have to have the voter roll verified. So we pretty much will know that person. If we don't, we obviously would check it very fast that the person was verified. There's also in the voter roll verification document, which I don't know if you had a chance to read, that's pretty technical, but it does say that if someone is inappropriately, removed or not allowed on the voter roll or wants to be added, that there's a very clear and fairly timely process to do that. So yeah, it is theoretically possible that someone could be not actually a legal resident and still try to vote, and then file.
Or they may be a legal resident that you don't recognize as a resident.
Well, by the
Then
end
they
of
would
March,
have to challenge that.
right. By the end of March, we should know. We should have our voter roll in good shape by March 15th if we have to have it final by April 7th. I mean, that's my managerial timetable on it. So we would have that voter roll very, very near final before the candidates file their paperwork. But yeah, hypothetically, it could happen. And what would you recommend we do if somebody is actually not a voter? All right.
Well, the question is, you would have to adjudicate as to whether they were a qualified voter.
Right. We would have to make that decision on that call. I
Yeah.
guess as a manager, I would simply say you accept their paperwork provisionally, and you do the check just as fast as you possibly can.
Yeah.
That's again, it
That's
goes
the
to,
only, I mean, when you were asking for possibilities.
yeah, exactly.
I
How
threw that
would
one
it
out.
happen? Yeah, that we would have to turn somebody down. Legally, the ordinance and charter both say that to run for office, you have to be a qualified voter. So if somebody did not meet that criteria. Nomi, was that you?
No, but I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
could an au pair become a candidate
If
and
they're,
be,
yeah,
Sure,
if
yes,
they're a
if they're a
resident.
resident.
Yeah,
And we've
yeah.
included them in this year's, regs very specifically because Arthur, I like
Yeah.
the fact that you keep bringing it up, that it's somebody who's, a home health aide for somebody who's older or an au pair. I mean, if this is their primary residence, they are a voter, they need to, if they're not on the county voter roll, they need to sign our little form to say that they want to vote to get added to our roll and give us, a driver's license or something. But basically, yeah, the criteria is not property ownership, it's now residence, and that's the right criteria. So yeah, you could have, if they're 18 years old and they're a resident, they're a qualified voter and they can run for office. I think it would be amazing to see a couple 18 or 20-year-olds on the council. It'd probably be quite an education for them. Katie?
Yeah, I think the qualified voter definition helps with that too in terms of candidates, because that has come up before. I've had residents ask me, because I think there were some people on the ballot before who were renters and they were known renters, and they're like, can they run? And I'm like, yeah,
That's
they
true.
they
That's true.
run,
Renters can vote and renters can run for office. We
right.
don't
There's
discriminate against
some
renters.
residents don't know that or understand that. So yeah, that's where
Well,
it might
that's
help.
one of the things with a homeowners association,
Yeah.
typically like in a condo association,
Yeah.
only the owners can rent, or only the owners
Mhm.
can vote. Renters can't vote. That's very different. That's a private homeowners
Right.
association rule. For government, renters can vote. So,
Mhm.
but we could publicize that in our info that we put out this year, because we do want everybody to vote. The
Sure.
more people who vote, the more representative and accurate your election is.
Mm.
So accepting nominations, I guess the way I would leave that is that if the committee's in charge of managing this process, they should have at least a little bit of discretion to handle weird situations. And we've just talked about it, so we now have a public record of how we would do that, which is that we would accept, the paperwork provisionally and just check as fast as we could to confirm that they're a qualified voter, because we'd want to, include them if we could. I mean, our elections are voter friendly. We want to include candidates, we want to include voters. Does that sound right to you, Katie, and you, Arthur?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think it sounds right, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to put a note in the margin here that says, good judgment and discretion on the part of the committee. Does that sound like
That's always called for.
you bet, and we try our best. All right, I'm writing it down. Good judgment and discretion on part of EC. And I pledge to do our best. Okay, going through this list, recounts. Ron has done a very nice thing here in the recounts, because he actually quoted the Maryland Code of Election Law about what it said about recounts. The version that we've got in our draft this year is a simplified version, because the county version and the state version is actually state law, says that candidates can't petition without having a certain percentage of the total votes cast for those two candidates. That's a little complicated. It doesn't need to be complicated. I just picked a round number. If the difference is less than 10 votes, they can ask for a recount. It's a simplified version of the state law. One of the points that Ron makes in various sections of his notes is that, the state laws, we're exempt from some of the state laws because we're so small. Tiny municipalities have exemptions. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't comply with the state law. I mean, that's the point you were making earlier, Arthur, about, what the state law says. If we can comply with it, we should. Even if we're not required to comply with it, we should follow it. So what we have on our recount provision could be either one of these, and we need to have a committee vote here. We could either go with the language that Ron has in item D here under recounts, which is the item from the state law. And it requires us as the committee to do this calculation of the percentages, greater than 5% of the total votes cast for the candidates. I mean, it's math, it's not complicated. Or we could go with a simpler Martin's Additions version, which we're allowed to do because we have some flexibility under the state law, and just say that if the margin is fewer than 10 votes, they can do a recount.
I would go for the 10 votes.
Okay.
yeah, I would as well. I would second that, certainly.
Just because it's simpler.
Yeah.
Nomi,
It's simpler and it's, nobody can argue about it.
right?
I
Nobody
totally
can-
agree.
Okay.
And I move.
All right. Nomi moves to go with the 10 votes language. Second.
I'll second it.
Yep.
Okay. Paul, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Yeah, I agree.
And again, under the state law, because we're so small, we do have some flexibility in how we do our elections. And this is just a simple version of it. No argument if it's 10 or fewer than 10. Okay, so that was 4-0 on that one. Okay, referendum questions. Ron recommends, in accordance with Maryland law, The Maryland, again, this is a case where state law on referendums does not necessarily apply to the village because we're so small, we can be exempt. I don't know if we want to be exempt. The state law, if I'm recalling it correctly, is that you have to have at least 20% of your registered voters sign a petition to put a referendum on the ballot, or the other way is that the council can vote to put a referendum item on the ballot. Right? There are two avenues that I know. That's what the state law says. And I didn't think it was necessary to spell it out here. We don't have a whole lot of referendums, but we could. And it's in here in this year's document because people asked about it. Nomi, you were one of the people asked about it back in the day. Can we even do referendums? And people didn't know the answer. So we thought it would be useful because that question has come up repeatedly. Can we do referendums? The answer is yeah, we can. And we can just do them according to state law. If Ron wants to take that reference out.
Yeah, Marty, the argument here is that it's not according to state law because state law does not govern our referendum process.
But we can, in fact, follow state law in our referendum process. That's our choice, right?
Yeah, but it's not in accordance with. We are not putting ourselves under state law in this case. So that from the lawyer's point of view, the language is suggesting that we are doing it under state law. So we don't need it. Just take it out.
Oh, okay.
We're doing it under our own law.
Right, right. In accordance with this ordinance or policy, referendum questions may be included. Right? That's an easy reword.
Yeah, good.
I got it.
So it's not under the aegis to control the authority or anything else of state law.
All right,
So
it is consistent with the state law, but it's not under the control of state law. I got it. So yeah, I think we should probably vote on this. Do we go ahead and make Ron's change here? I think we should. I move that we accept Ron's language here.
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor?
I,
Okay. 4-0, we will fix the referendum language. We will include the fact that you can have referendums in BMA. We just won't say that it's under the state law, although it's consistent with the state law. Okay. Non-resident voting. This is an interesting question you raised. We had talked about having non-residents be able to fill out that little form to say that they had intent to return, because that's part of our definition of residence now, is the intent to return. And the language in this year's version is new language because the council just voted for that new definition. But Rod doesn't have any problem with the language there, except this question, right? Why did we say that non-resident property owners can file their signed forms for a maximum of 7 years? Well, we moved it from 5 to 7 years because Jen Bergeron, who's in the State Department, said you could have 2 back-to-back 3-year State Department assignments, and said she wanted to keep her voting rights as a resident here for 7 years. And so the committee voted earlier in our last meeting to make it 7 years to accommodate 2 3-year deployments or 2 3-year State Department assignments. Problem is that Ron is saying removing this limitation, but the definition of qualified voter talks about temporary absence. It doesn't say indefinite. And Arthur, you remember in the summer when you and I were talking about this, we said, how long is temporary? 2 years, 5 years, And the committee has come up with a reasonable basis to say, okay, a 7-year absence, you can continue to file annually or require a form to get a ballot while you're gone 7 years. Then you have to come back and actually touch home base. If we make it unlimited, as Ron recommends here, then any non-resident owner who's gone for 40 years can vote. So I wanted to ask both of our council members present, Arthur and Katie, and of course the committee members too. What do you think? I mean, do you mean to? I mean, the language in the charter says temporary absence. How long is temporary?
That is a debatable question. I suggest that you raise it with the council, put in your recommendation. It's something we're going to have to tussle with.
Katie, do you want to chime in on that?
I absolutely agree. Yeah, yeah, that's a tough one. I'd say to present to everyone. Yeah.
I mean, saying that somebody's gone for 20 years is temporary absence, that's kind of stretching the margins a little bit, don't you think?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I think that is a stretch, but there are those that could debate that all day. So yeah.
Well,
that's the issue. Yeah,
okay.
I think that's too long, but yeah. And for military tour, does anyone, what's the average for like a military deployment? Is that
19
it's
months
2 to 3
usually,
years,
19
could be
months,
2
but
to
it can
3
be
years,
3
1,
years.
2, 3.
3 years? I mean, that's why the 7 is an interesting number, because I thought that kind of covers military
It would, yeah.
deployment too. But yeah, I kind of like, I mean, I like the number. I think you need something tangible there,
Hmm.
and that would help alleviate the debates on temporary. But that's my take. That's my 2 cents.
This is really helpful. I'm so glad you both are here. Committee members, what do we think? Do we leave it to the council?
I'd leave
think we
it, yeah, I'd leave that one to the council. And I don't know that 7 is the number. Why 7, you know?
Yeah, just because it covered two 3-year
Back-to-back tours, yeah.
back-to-back State Department assignments. Jen was the one who works for the State Department and said, my assignments are 3 years and I get them back to back. I'd like to continue to vote. And of course, we're voter friendly, so, but I'm going to put here a note that the committee agrees to ask the council. I don't think we need a vote on that. Does anyone not want to ask the council to make that call?
But I think we agree that this ask the council.
John, Nomi?
Yeah, I would defer to the council, to make the call. But
Okay.
certainly 7 years certainly appears certainly appropriate for me,
Mhm.
for temporary.
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah,
in total agreement.
okay. So we, as a committee, can recommend that 7 years seems reasonable, but that we'll leave the final decision to the council on that.
Good.
Okay. Voter roll. All right, I'm reading number G here on Ron's list. We're almost done with Ron's list here. The committee is responsible for verifying adding new voters and likewise for removing names of people who are no longer qualified according to the process. And this goes to that thing we talked about earlier about the village voter roll is supplementary for people who aren't already on the county voter roll, the 2 different ways you can get on our voter roll. Yeah, so voter can register by registering with the state, in which case they show up on the county voter roll and they show up on ours. We still have to make sure they live here, but they do. So there's nothing we need to do on that. H, VMA elections are held entirely by mail. The committee shall utilize the service of mail vote contractor. This is all consistent with the charter. You could add in there, as approved by the council, but that's what the charter says. So you don't need to duplicate it. There shall be no in-person person. Ron is mistaken on the last half of that paragraph when he says that it's inconsistent to say that you'll also have a drop box. I think he was just probably tired when he wrote this because, in fact, having a mail vote drop box is a standard part of doing mail vote elections. It's not a ballot box where you put a bare ballot in. And we can reword that to be clear here. It shouldn't say a ballot drop box. It should say a mail vote drop box because that's what it is. And that is, a secure, accessible mail vote. So we can change that word and we should probably vote to do that because it is a wording change. The last line of H there, we will change the language in the ordinance, the draft ordinance, to say drop off completed ballot envelopes in a secure, accessible mail vote drop box. That removes any confusion.
That seems to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I flagged that because I wanted to ask Ron about that, but yeah, I think that.
It's not a ballot box. It's a
Right.
mail
No.
vote drop box,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
a standard component of mail votes.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that we do that. I think that's a really good thing that the committees came up with in the last couple of years was to do that drop box. I like that a lot. Again, it makes it more accessible, more voter friendly. Okay. Thank you all for bearing with us as we go through this. Committee, do we need to vote on that mail vote change or is that administrative? We could just do it.
Just do it.
Administrative.
Just do it.
Okay. I'm putting here, okay, no vote needed. Mail-in contractor. This is an important one. The contractor reports to the committee, not to the manager. And there's 2 pieces to this. One is just like to that first line. Ron has some concern here about the fact that the manager administers contracts according to the council budget. But, I'm a contractor. I have more than 200 federal contracts in the last 20 years. And the standard procedure on all government contracts, I have some state contracts and some local contracts too, all of them, is that the human resources office or the payroll office does the contracting, and I and my team, as the contractors, report to the project director. We don't report to the payroll office or the administrative staff. We report to the project director for the project we're hired to do. And I don't think Ron is very clear here in terms of how he describes that, because in fact, what we're saying in Martin's additions is that the village manager manages the contract just like the payroll and HR department and, the Department of Transportation does, but that the contractor reports to the project director, which is us, the committee. And that's a standard format for how you do contracting. There's nothing novel about it at all. It's just the way it's done. So I wanted to talk about it here because I think that's part of where we've had this confusion in the past about having the staff get involved in the day-to-day management of the election process, which they shouldn't be involved in. And it's really clear that the contract management is like what the payroll office does and the HR department, and the project management is done by the project director, which is the committee. Does anyone have any questions or anything you want to add on that? I mean, do we need to clarify that in our document in some way?
Yeah, I think this has to be thoroughly reviewed by the council when you bring it forward. Make all your good arguments, and I think it needs a full review.
Well, if you put the village manager in charge of the project management, which is the election management, then you're back in that confusion where we don't have a clean firewall.
Right.
It's really
Well,
pretty basic.
you may have to accept the possibility you don't have a clean firewall. So, okay, move on.
Okay. Committee, do you have any other comments on that? Okay.
Oh, no, I'm just wondering about it. No, but that's fine. No, I don't have any comments right now.
Okay, well, we will certainly make the argument, because the standard
Yeah.
procedure is not to have the contract manager manage the project work. There's two different pieces to that. And like I said, I got a couple hundred contracts that are exactly in that format. Okay.
Well, one thing, Marty, you have to understand is, as a contractor and me as a contractor, hey, the project manager is the one that approves the billing, et cetera, and the administrative stuff. You
Sure.
know that.
Yeah. The
I
contract.
mean, and that's what the village manager would do.
Yeah, the village manager, would get the invoices. We as a
Sure.
committee would say, yes, this contractor did the work, we have to confirm the work. I mean, the normal way it normally works in my
So
contract
that,
is the project director says, yes, Marty and her team did the project and signs off on my invoice, and then the invoice goes to basically.
right. I mean, this is all standard stuff. So, could be some issue there if we're really concerned about the firewall,
Mhm.
possibly.
Well, see, I don't see contract management as a violation of the firewall. I see project management, election management as a violation of the firewall. Does that make sense?
Well,
That you're gonna have to do some definitions. I don't think this is the time to make these definitions, but
Yeah.
it's there must be fuzzy areas here. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Define more clearly is the note I'm putting in here. Right. Committee members, do you want to discuss this further? We don't have a vote on this because we don't have a definitive yes or no motion here, but Nomi, what do you think?
I don't have a strong opinion about this, I have to say.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Okay.
I'm not really sure about it myself, quite honestly, but that's my thoughts.
Yeah.
Maybe that we should leave it up to the council to decide,
But these are fuzzy areas. I'm not sure there's a decision here to be made.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, judgment calls, some discretion. But, we don't want to put Michael or Aaron or a council member in the position where they are deciding election management processes, because then they're involved up to their ears in the election process that they're supposed to be arm's length from. So it really is a protection of the staff as much as anything else, from my perspective, to separate out, okay, you got contract management over here, and then the project is directed by the committee. So that's sort of basic. Anyway, we can pursue that further with the council. All right, so we're down to, let's see. Oh, it's still a number I here, which says there's one line in the specifications, the instructions for the contractor, that says the election committee has some discretion to specify additional instructions as necessary to ensure a fair, inclusive, and accurate election. It doesn't let them just make arbitrary instructions. It has to be that there's some need as necessary, right, to have an accurate election. And the question here that Ron raised was about overly broad discretion to administratively offer the rules, and that maybe it would raise the price of the contract. But again, you need some managerial discretion to do a complex project. We've already talked about that in some other areas and agreed to it. I think that, in fact, it's extremely unlikely to increase the price of the contract because it's extremely unlikely to have to be used. But when you have something like the situation last year where there were no stamps on the envelopes, no return postage, the committee needs to be able to respond to that and instruct the, election contractor what to do to fix it, because it's our job to make sure the election works. So that's what that's about. It's not about, running over budget or anything like that. And, other ordinances don't have budget limits. The ethics ordinance doesn't set a cap on how much the ethics committee could spend to, do an investigation. That's one of the things that people criticize the ethics ordinance for. There's no cap on it. Could certainly put a cap here, but the additional instructions is just, sort of seems to me elementary flexibility. Not with not any likely financial effect, because normally we get a bulk price from Eclectic, which is, here's what we'll do for your election for X number of voters, right? It's not something that varies a whole lot, depending on if there's a glitch. Last year, the glitch was their fault. There was no extra charge to us, as I understand. Arthur or Katie, you can correct me, but that's what I understand from Michael, is that they screwed up the envelopes. They paid to fix it. There was no charge at all. But the committee needed to be able to tell them, hey, guys, we got a problem here. Go fix it. That's the committee's role. What do you guys think? Comments from our committee? This is down in the weeds, isn't it?
I don't know. I think we need to give us a little thought.
Okay. Nomi?
I don't have, I need to think about it some more.
Okay, that's good. That's fine. We approve of people thinking. Paul?
I'm the same boat.
Okay.
I
Okay.
don't know where to go.
Okay. Hold it open, right? To be more consideration. We have one more round, where we can do this, come back next week and look at this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right, vote counting procedure. Contractors shall sign unopened any ballot envelopes the committee determines to be non-conforming. This is about curing ballots. And it is mandatory that we cure ballots. Again, this is not something that, we're required to do by Moses on the mountain. It's required because it's a good thing to do, because we're voter friendly and we want to be inclusive in our elections. And he just says how Ron's question is just how we're going to contact the voter to let them have an opportunity to cure the envelope. How does that occur? And it's easy to put in, by email and telephone, or by email and in person. Same way we have it everywhere else. We say we have to contact the voter. So that's an easy fix. I think that's probably administrative. We just say how we contact it. Everybody good with that?
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Okay, good. Holding the election open, and I'm to K now. Almost done. If the voter subsequently cures a non-conforming ballot envelope, the committee shall instruct the contractor in writing to open that envelope and include those votes in the final tally. And then we have 5 days basically for the ballot cured. That's an improvement to clarify from last year. Last year it was really vague about how much time the committee had to cure ballots. And Ron is concerned about holding the election open. Last year, the committee held the election open for 2 weeks after the vote counting session, which was the longest I know of ever in all the years I've been in VMA. And I'm sure they had good reasons. I don't know what they were doing because I wasn't privy to it, but they didn't announce the official results till 2 weeks after the session. What this does is make it more specific. It says that the committee has basically 5 days to contact a voter. The voter has that same 5 days. We're required to recontact the voter, immediately after the vote counting session, where we find the ballot envelope that is non-conforming. And I assume, promptly means next morning. And then we have 5 days to get back if the last line in K from Ron is just a misunderstanding. There is absolutely no opportunity for any voter to change their vote, right? Because the ballot envelope is at the contractors. It's not here. We don't have the ballot envelope. The contractor in the vote counting process, which is spelled out here, the contractor holds up the envelope. We can see somebody didn't sign the back, or they didn't sign it correctly, or whatever the problem is, where they spilled orange juice on it or something. And we then, sorry, I lost my video here. We then have a responsibility. It says shall. We shall get in touch with that voter and give them a chance to fix it. If they don't fix it, that's on them, but at least we give them a chance. And the 5 days is actually shorter than, I mean, it sets a definite timeline on it, which was not in the regs last year. It actually makes it more specific that the voter doesn't have like 3 months to cure their ballot. They have 5 days. And that sound reasonable to people?
Yeah, Marty, I think you're correct that Ron raises a non-issue there.
Okay, so we're good with that one. I'm just gonna put it all set. And election interference. There, Ron again says that the state law doesn't apply. And, well, again, the fact that we're not required to comply with the state law doesn't mean that we shouldn't comply with the state law. I mean, it's generally a good idea to comply with the state election law where you can. And this is a local version. I mean, it could be Martin's Additions version. I think Ron's problem there is just that we refer to the state law, and the state, this is just a description. The state law, that section 16205, says exactly that. It prohibits any person from interfering with election officials in the performance of their duties. We don't need to quote it. We can just say, consistent with state law on election interference, the VMA committee shall document any interference and promptly report to the council. Because we need to have something about election interference. We need to have a responsibility assigned to the committee to, because we can't just ignore interference. It's not.
I think, I'm not sure if you can just simply eliminate the first part of the reference to the state law and
And
just
just
use the second.
say that
That's part of the
VMA
sentence.
prohibits interference with election officials.
Yeah.
Just do it on our own account.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
do it
that's
on your
fine.
own.
Yeah.
That's fine. Okay. Okay. All right, committee members, are we okay with that change?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I think,
Alright. 4-0, we're good. And that brings us to the end of Ron's list, which is really nice.
Moving on. Woo!
Moving on. I'm looking at the time, it's 9:04. Essentially, what we've got here is what we've done, what we would have had on our agenda. If you go back to our agenda, we talked about, doing a final review and vote on the third draft of the consolidated document, which is what we just did, and with Ron's thing, and review and vote on the second draft. Well, he didn't have much to say about the voter verification. We are good on that. I think the way to go for this is not to spend a whole lot more time tonight, unless somebody's got something specific that they want to change on the draft that they have in the packet. I think the most efficient way to do this is to have each of you take another final read of these two documents and just send to me administratively any markups that you have beyond what we've already got. All
Yeah.
right. So we voted now tonight to do various numbers of the things Ron suggested, and that was really helpful. Now I think we can just vote that, overall, we accept the third draft as amended by Ron of the consolidated document, and we accept the second draft as amended by Ron of the updated voter roll, and that we will proceed as a committee to do any final markup over the next week. Does that sound sensible?
Sounds good.
Yep.
Okay. All right, we need a motion to that effect, that we vote hereby as a committee, we vote to accept the two documents as amended by Ron, and we'll provide any final markup to the committee chair before our next meeting. Can we move that?
I move that.
Naomi moves. Any second?
Yeah, I'll second it. Yeah.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Okay, aye.
Okay, we're coming to the home stretch here. Item C here under our action items is about discussing the draft public explanation of the ordinance per the council's standard operating procedure for introducing ordinances. Well, we did vote earlier 4-0 to propose to the council that they consider making this an ordinance, which would make it more stable. And so that means if we're going to propose as an ordinance, that we need to write a standard operating procedure, standard SOP explanation. That explanation can be very short. I think, Katie, Arthur, tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, we don't need to write pages of an explanation here.
No,
document-
No,
I
yeah,
think- no, just
Just-
submit the document, I think, and
basically, yeah,
Buttress.
a mission paragraph of what it is.
Okay. All right.
argue for the points that you
Yeah.
know that will be in contention.
Yeah.
Okay.
Essentially the ones that I raised and any
Yeah.
others you can think of.
Absolutely. That was really good guidance for us. Include points of discussion and contention for the council.
I let me raise one other one with you before you go.
Sure.
And that is, I've raised this with you before, Marty, about how do you document, how do you determine whether someone's a resident? And you call for some kind of a document like a driver's license.
Mhm.
You know, there could be people here, quite legitimate residents, who don't have those kinds of documents.
That's true. On
And then
Alpera,
you
for
have to
example,
go like on their assertion that,
you have-
in their signature, that they are signing an affidavit, yes, I am a resident.
Yeah, I talked to Boris, the exec director at the county, about that.
Yeah.
Because this is not just our problem, this is, statewide. And he said that you do need some kind of written document. Just like when we have a non-resident owner, we ask them to fill out a form saying that they intend to return. This is their sole resident or primary, same kind of form. That you do need something. For example, the 18-year-old son of a resident might not have a driver's license yet. I mean,
So,
A
so
lot
you're
of
saying
kids
it could,
don't.
it could be
A
an
lot of kids are
assertion.
waiting.
right, it's called a declaration.
Oh, okay,
and
okay.
it's
That's,
a
oh,
very
that
simple-
does it.
It
Okay,
doesn't need to be notarized, but it needs to be in writing. So that the
Okay.
committee would actually have a file, I assume we would scan them and computerize the file, of the documents that residents have provided that verify their right to vote in terms of our need to meet the
Okay.
state regs for documentation. And it is not as secure as actually having a driver's license. But people have fake driver's license too. It's not like there's no magic way to really, unless you actually did a census of the village, which is an interesting thought. I don't think we've ever done that. And even a census would only be good for that moment in time because, we have a lot of turnover. And it's an interesting, it was an interesting intellectual challenge to figure out what actually does count under the state regs as documentation. They have a list. And what you do where somebody who doesn't have that, like an au pair from Sweden, right? She's entitled to
That's right.
vote.
They
She
don't
lives
have an
here.
electric bill, they don't have a driver's license.
Yeah,
And so you're saying, let me just clarify, that an assertion, a signed assertion that I
a
am.
signed declaration, signed
Declaration.
and dated declaration.
Okay,
And
That's
we could,
good.
there's a simple form for that. The county has forms for that. We have a simple form for that. It's not like a long affidavit thing. It's just, 2 sentences. maybe
all my
one sentence.
concerns are resolved.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I live for that, Arthur. Really, please. Okay,
When was the last time you heard that?
Oh, I'm quite an agreeable person, except if you saw my black eye and bloody nose, you might not.
yeah. feel
Arthur,
better.
Arthur, you have to convince me.
Okay, I'll try.
Okay, discussion of any other procedural election issues? Anybody got anything? Okay. And I will go ahead and draft the public explanation. I think that's administrative and I can send it to you guys for a markup and I'll do that as soon as I can. Hopefully over the weekend, I'll get the short explanation. I'll try to keep it short. Any residents? We didn't have residents tonight. I was hoping we'd have some. That was always nice when they're here. Committee task assignment. Well, we've got our task assignment, which is to review the 2 documents we approved tonight for any final edits. And it's fine to ask, your spouse or your neighbor if they want to look at it too, because, we do like community input. So it doesn't have to just be your edits on it. It's fine to share the document informally and say, does this read clear to you? Does this make sense? And see if a neighbor thinks, oh, this part needs a better word or whatever. So our assignment is basically, we'll all have the same assignment, which is to go through the 2 documents. And at our next meeting on the 6th, we will vote to consolidate them. So Appendix A will join up with the rest of it, and we'll have one consolidated sort of standard ordinance and or resolution, depending on what the council decides. So task assignments clear for everybody?
Yeah,
Well, quick question, should we be using ordinance or just, what language should we?
We should call it an ordinance because that's what we voted to propose.
Okay, all
Council
right,
may change the language to call it a resolution,
right.
a policy resolution, and let them make that change. That's their call. So we voted 4-0.
Okay, we're gonna drop it in their lap then about the
Yeah. And if they make,
resolution or ordinance language, right? Okay, that's fine.
and
problem.
if they make it a resolution, then I'm looking at the time they might have to spend because somebody could challenge it. And even though I think it's such a solid document at this point, because you guys did such good, and we had good work to build on. What the council approved last year and in 2022 was very good. We just kind of pick it up around the edges a little bit. and clarify a couple places, like clarifying 5 days for ballot curing rather than having it be an open-ended period. So we've done a lot of cleanup here, but it's minor. It's like the substance, the structure of it is really clear. Anything else from anybody?
Real
Well,
I
good.
was just reading a note, with Ron's comments just about the red line. Are you all also keeping red line copies too in
Yeah.
a file? We don't necessarily have to see them, but they're just good to have.
We
to
have
track.
had, you're right, and I really
Good
believe in
things.
red lines. I'm a big fan of
Yeah.
it. We've had red lines at every stage of the document.
Oh,
We
good.
didn't give it to you and Ron because the red line on
Yeah.
is like really pretty messy at this point because there were several rounds of revision as the committee worked its way through it.
Sure.
And a lot of things that we did, it's the same structure and procedures as last year, but they're not in the same place because we reorganized the document to actually make it have some coherence. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it looked like a camel before with all the different pieces of it. Now it looks like, it's got some structure. So when you look at the red line,
More like an octopus
it looks like it was an octopus. Now it's got a structure. And so
with a
when you look at the
brain.
red-
Octopus with a brain.
well, that's true. Octopuses are incredibly smart. But anyway, yeah, I mean, and we have the red lines, and I think what
Okay.
we can do is what
Yeah.
I'll do, I'll just volunteer this task, is I'll take the original document from 23, right, for
Mhm.
each of these, and then do a markup. You can do a compare docs with the
Mhm.
current piece of the consolidated ordinance that corresponds to that. I mean, one of the nice things we've done is shorten the whole thing
Mhm.
by removing a lot of duplication. So that, I mean, there is still some duplication because that's inevitable where you have to have a sort of description up front and then you get to the specifics later on in the document. But basically, we took out a lot of duplication. And so you got all this red stuff, it looks like you crossed out the ordinance, but it's all the same regs.
Right. Right. It's
So
just streamlined. It reads very well. It does. It's great. I think you're doing a great job, everybody.
oh,
It's
thank you.
yeah. It's just good to keep. If you keep, it's good to just keep a file. Just in
We
case
have them all. We
Look,
have them
good,
all. We've done
good. That's fine. I didn't expect that you wouldn't, but just check.
always good to check. Anything else? Well, you guys have been wonderful as usual. Arthur and Katie, thank you again for all your help. Committee members, you are just the best. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
We're looking at December 6th.
December 6th and Monday, December 18th is our next two meetings. Okay, December 6th and
Yes, 6th and 18th, okay.
6th and 18th, yeah. It's at 7:45 both times. And
I move to adjourn.
yay, Nobi. Second,
Oh, yep, second.
John seconds. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Okay, what time we
Aye.
adjourn? 7:12 or, I mean,
No.
9:12 or,
9:14 on my computer.
okay, all right,
9:14. Thank
Okay.
you, everybody.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Arthur.
Right, good
Thank
night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good
And
night.
tell Ron we said thank
Night.
you also.
Will do. Okay, thank you.